Welcome back to Web Cafe AI. We do daily artificial intelligence videos for your personal and business life. In today's video, we're going to be checking out the platform of Make and doing a full comprehensive tutorial of everything you need to know about doing Make with OpenAI and the platform itself. This has been a highly requested tutorial, so make sure to give a like right off the bat. That shows me that we want more tutorials on this platform. But for now, let's go ahead and jump in and see what we can do with Make, how we can understand integrations when it comes to OpenAI with ChatGPT, and much, much more. From my experience on this platform, I believe one of the biggest factors and differences between this and other automation platforms like Zapier or Pipedream is the cost associated with this platform, but also it is a little bit more complex when it comes to doing certain functions due to the fact of limited integration that can be found natively on the platform. So right off the bat, this is a lot more cost effective than Zapier. So if you're looking for a more cost effective solution, you should probably use Make. But when using Make, understand that there is going to be less natively integrated API, less natively integrated software, so you have to require a lot of webhooks when using this platform. If you want more information on this, as you see here, we can come down here with this nice little diagram here, giving all the information that is required. And as you see, what I said before, only 1,000 apps are natively integrated to this platform comparative to 5,000 apps on Zapier. This isn't a big issue if you know how to integrate the other apps just using the API documentation. If you don't though, that is where Zapier becomes a little bit more effective when dealing with more native integration. All right, so I went ahead and jumped over to our dashboard here. If you don't have a Make account, you can go ahead and start for free. We have our link down there. Disclaimer, it is an affiliate link, so you can go ahead and use it if you want to support here at Web Cafe AI. But for now, let's go ahead and jump through this entire platform, its dashboard, and everything you need to understand. We're going to show you how to integrate OpenAI onto the platform, and we're going to go ahead and do a flow together, or in this context, they call them scenarios. So right off the bat, what you'll see when you go to your dashboard here is going to be your operations up here. So essentially how much either data is being transferred or operations in use. As I said before, operations in this context is like task on Zapier. It's their way of finding whether you're overusing in a plan. So the way an operation would essentially be controlled is that when you do a flow, it would be X amount of operations associated with the amount of tasks you operated or automated in that flow. The next tab here we have is teams. So this is where you'll be able to add multiple teams. I think this is a pretty powerful feature due to the fact for Zapier, I believe the minimum for teams is like 130 a month. So you get access to teams right off the bat on a free platform. One side note, this is currently the free plan, so I want to make that obvious as well. So we are obviously getting access to a limited amount of features, but I think that'd be a great use case if you plan on just trying the platform out for free as well. As you see here for users, it has us here at Web Cafe AI. And as I said before, in order to get multiple users on an account, you need to do a Teams account with Zapier, which is much more costly compared to here. Subscriptions, this takes you to your plans essentially. So if you wanted to raise your plans here, this is where you would do it. And everything else here is not really relevant for what we want to do here. So let's go ahead and check out everything to the left here and understand what is going on over here. So teams is just a more in-depth view of the teams tab that we saw earlier. Scenarios, this is going to be essentially your workflows that you're working out here. And what's great here is that we have the ability to categorize workflows by adding a folder here. So I can just do test name. This will be a great way to categorize if you have clients or there are specific operations you want in a specific folder, such as, maybe a marketing folder, maybe a customer support folder, and so on. So you want to organize your flows a little bit more. Here you can do active scenarios, inactive scenarios, and then concepts. I'm assuming in this context is more of just like you messing around, seeing what you can do with the API and stuff like that. Coming over here, we have templates. So this is kind of showing example workflows that exist within the community. And essentially you can get ideas from these. As you probably already know, a lot of these workflows are typically pretty simple, but they're a great resource if you are not sure on how to work a certain app. As you see here, we can search app names up here, such as Shopify, and then it would show all associated templates that it currently has and that it's readily available into your project. So for example, if I want to do this one, I could click here and I can say start guided setup and then create new scenario from template. And then obviously, once I have the scenario here, I would have to essentially give access and connect my accounts API-wise, which we'll get into. But first, let's just go ahead and just walk through the side section here. So the next section here is connections. This is going to show all of your natively integrated connections. So right now I have Printful, but essentially this is where you would have, your Google Docs set up, your Gmail set up. This is essentially where we can access the APIs on those apps, because this is their way of saying to the API documentation, hey, they're authorized. You can, send an email, create a draft, and do this stuff a lot easier than for every single one of the requests would be a webhook, a post, a GET. It kind of circumnavigates that and essentially allows us to access the API directly with authorization. Our next section here is webhooks. This is going to be a big deal, specifically with this platform, more than Zapier, due to the fact that this platform isn't as integrated across the board here. So you just gotta get really comfortable with using webhooks. Webhook essentially is a link that you either can send data to or get data from, and this allows you to do certain functions in different softwares. All these automation companies are really is just using essentially user-friendly Python and user-friendly calls between software. Like this made the UI look really good, and it allows us to natively integrate it so we don't have to always call and authorize any type of function. For here though, this is gonna be an important area to know because of the fact that you will be using webhooks a lot if you decide to use Make as your main automation software. This essentially is where you'll create public and private keys, and you can kind of store the data here. That's pretty cool. You can also add your device to your Make account. I thought this was pretty cool because I'm pretty sure you can't do this in Zapier if you wanted to, but for now, you can do that with Make. They have data storage, but as you'll see, there are limitations to the data storage. So I believe with a free plan, you can only store up to 1 megabyte or 1 megabit of data currently. So keep that in mind. And then we have data structures. This is a little bit more advanced. This has to do more with JSON, XML, and CSV. So as you see here, it's most commonly used for sterilizing or parsing data formats such as JSON, XML, CSV. So essentially, you receive data from a webhook, and the data is unorganized or not how you want it structured for the preceding steps. This is where you can set up a data structure. Now, what I want to say here, though, is with ChatGPT and OpenAI, you're able to do a lot of that anyways using the AI. So, searching through data and stuff like that. So this has become not obsolete, but it works in its own function. Then we got Resource Hub. So, essentially an area where you can ask questions, get more information about certain integrations and so on. Now, if we go to My Apps, this is where you can build out custom apps here, as you see here. So this is a little bit more complex. I don't really see anyone using this unless, a client request building out a custom app. And as you see, we got examples of possible apps you can create / connect to. So now we got notifications, but as you see here, we have one called Zone US1. You might be asking yourself, okay, why is it called that? Essentially, what Make allows you to do that is more cost effective than I've seen in Zapier is you can create multiple organizations. So for example, Zone US1, I'd get notifications specific to that organization. I will say that is probably one of the bigger selling points, other than the cost associated with Zapier, is how much openness it gives to having a lot of people on your platform. So if you had like a team of 5 people using a platform like this, you'd be able to do it at very cheap and be still very organized. All right, enough of me giving you an overview of the platform. Let's go ahead and walk through a scenario together. First though, let's go ahead and connect ChatGPT and OpenAI into this platform. I also got to connect some other apps into this platform natively so we can start messing around and building out a flow together and understanding the intricacies when it comes to building out a scenario on Make. I'm going to go ahead and come up here to create new scenario here, and let's go ahead and start connecting some of our API connections here. So to begin, we're just going to go ahead and click this plus button here. I'm going to come down to search applications. I'm going to put in OpenAI, and then they have it as ChatGPT Whisperer. Let's see if they have a native one. I don't believe they do have a native. Okay, they don't. So it's all under one connection here. Let's just say, for now, we're just going to say generate image, right? Even though that doesn't make sense as a trigger, we're going to first let's just create a connection with Make here. So we're going to say create connection. And as you see here, we need an API key, and then you don't need a organization ID from my understanding here. So let me go ahead and show you how to get your API key. So I'm going to go ahead and link this down in the description down below, but essentially you're going to want to go to OpenAI developer side, and we're going to go ahead and sign up here. So when you click sign up, you're going to be able to essentially use one of these as a login or just enter your email address. So first, create a OpenAI account. All right, so I logged into our OpenAI account here at WebCafe AI. The next thing you want to do once you've created your account here is we're going to go ahead and go to View API Keys. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a secret key here together. Don't worry, I'm going to delete it after the tutorial, so don't try to take it and expect it to work. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this one make, create a secret key here. Once we have our secret key, we're going to go ahead and copy it. There we go, API key copied. Let's go back to make here. And let's go to create connection, put our API key in and hit save. All right, perfect. So as you see here, we got our connection here. And as you saw earlier, we could rename it. So if you want to rename it, all you gotta do is come to connections and we could just say make key or API key. And then this could maybe help with organization. So if you have a ton of connections, maybe for clients, you could, add like a little bit of a square bracket here and be like client A. So if they're running their automations in your backend, you can organize your connections like that a little bit. I will say it seems like the connections found on Zapier is a little bit more organized better than the ones here. This one seems a little jumbly. But from here though, we can go back to our scenario and we've successfully connected OpenAI to Make here. So let's go ahead and show different functions here. I'm gonna go ahead and connect one other software here. I'm gonna do Gmail. So I'm gonna go ahead, add a module here, and let's go ahead and do search application. We're gonna do Gmail, perfect. And I'm just gonna do a random action right now just so I can create the connection. I'm gonna create the connection. So it looks like to create a connection with Gmail, all we gotta do is sign in with Google. As you see here, we're gonna do our courses account. It's gonna ask us to say allow, we're gonna allow it. And let's see if it works. Perfect, it works. As you see, some connections are easier than others. Obviously, Google is huge. So they're gonna make their API connections very simple, such as just logging in, relative to OpenAI. But all OpenAI is a key. That is actually pretty important too as well, because of the fact that since we have associated a key with Make, we now will know the amount of usage and cost associated with that key. So that really helps you when you scale and maybe need to make multiple keys for XYZ reason, such as maybe I make a key specific for XYZ client. You understand the cost associated with that individual client. But for now, we have the two apps we're going to go ahead and use today, so I can kind of show you all the functionalities of Make when it comes to creating a scenario. The example we're going to do today essentially is we went ahead and took our main company account here, we sent it to our courses account here, and as a pseudo email so we can have data to play around with. But we're just going to assume that we got an email from a potential lead that says interested in AI automation for a restaurant. Hey, wondering what services you offer for customer service, and then best regards, Corbin Brown. I guess I'm talking to myself. But here is the email we're going to use as data, so we can show everything that's possible on this Make platform. So let's go ahead and proceed here, and we're going to go ahead and change our trigger. It is not going to be OpenAI. We're going to go ahead and change this to a Gmail. I'm going to say watch emails triggers when a new email is received to be processed according to specific criteria. And then as you see here, it's going to give us a bunch of different options here. And before we jump in any further here, I want to showcase a couple of things you should know about the underlying UI that you see. First off, you'll notice that, I went ahead and took the initiative to rename it. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to email response lead. So that's where you rename the underlying scenario. Come down here, this is how you turn it on or off. Come down here, this is essentially the schedule setting. So what this means in this context is that every 15 minutes, it's going to check and listen for a new email coming in. Let's go ahead and proceed to the controls. Save is big here. For some reason, I'm not too sure why, but if you use Zapier or other platforms, their save settings are more cloud-based. So it's like working on Google Docs where it automatically saves. For Make though, you gotta hit that save button. So if you're working on a long, complex project, make sure you hit that save button. If you don't, and your browser crashes, your computer crashes, you're gonna lose all your work. Keep that in mind. Now, most of these scenario settings aren't too important. I would say probably the most important one though for a client would be data confidential. You'd want to enable this in the context that the data that is being passed around, you wouldn't really want Make to log any of that data. This may cause issues with debugging, but would be important in the context of confidentiality. One thing I want to point out as well is when you do AI automation and use OpenAI and use OpenAI's API key, they have stated as a company that they don't track the messaging and data that's being passed through the API key. So to clarify a bit on that, if you're using regular ChatGPT UI, like just the chat bot, like the stuff that came out in November, they do track every single message that's found on the ChatGPT front end. But if you use the OpenAI API key, they have stated that they don't track that data. this is on their play. This is to incentivize large companies to use the API key to ensure that their data is secure. So the next feature we have here is notes. I can go ahead and right click this, say add a note, and then, maybe want to tell myself this is for potential leads. This is a great tool to use in the context that you have multiple people in your team and multiple people working on a potential flow here, and that's going to make it more obvious for them to maybe not mess with a certain incoming parameter or outcoming out parameter. If you get messed up here and you're going through the UI here and it gets a little bit crazy here when we add more blocks, you can hit this button here to auto align, reset the frame on your underlying computer. And moving from here, we have flow control, tools, and text parser. So these are kind of, think of these if you used Zapier before, these are like the by Zapier apps, such as Formatter, Web Parser, and stuff like that. This is kind of where they centralize it. They call them, flow control, tools, and text parser. So this is kind of where they're in their natively built apps that they have on their backend and you can use in their flows. We're going to go ahead and use some of those today so we can kind of show you how those work. And then finally, we kind of have our favorite apps that we like to use, such as OpenAI and Gmail. So the flow we're going to be building out today, or scenario in this context, essentially, is we're going to be looking at all emails coming into our Gmail box here. We're going to identify with a filter and GBT sentiment analysis on whether it is a lead or MISC type email. So whether essentially is this a potential lead or is this just a random email for maybe a customer service situation. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and create a response contextually to that email coming in. And then we're going to set it up as a draft to be sent to that potential lead. That didn't make a lot of sense. Don't worry, we're going to walk through it together. Let's go ahead and start off with our first step here, which essentially is going to be identifying what type of emails we want to be looking for. Now, in theory, I could set up a Gmail filter here and then look for a specific syntax. So in that context, maybe with every single one of your leads, it comes from a form or it comes in a way that within that lead email, there's a specific piece of data that can be found on every single one of those emails. So for example, let's just say we had a Webflow form or we had a Shopify form, and within the subject line on every single lead email or within one of the form variables, it essentially had, client lead, or it had somewhere in the footer like, something like schedule a call, like these type of terms that maybe could only be found in incoming emails. You could use that as a syntax. But let's assume that we don't have something like that and it's really just random, where the subject line and the body could be different on every single lead. So we're going to go ahead and use AI in order to solve this. So we're going to do a simple filter here, and we're going to do all emails. We'll do all unread emails because we're assuming we're getting it in. Now, I will say this would be operationally heavy, cost-wise, in the sense of a lot of operation tasks would be used. So, it'd be in your best interest to use a Gmail filter, but I think it'd be really cool to show using AI in this sense to cipher for you. So we're going to do only unread emails, and essentially we're going to do maximum result of 1. And then as you see here, some have the option to show advanced settings. So if you're looking for very specific stuff here, such as search phrase and all this different information, that's kind of where you'd input that stuff. But for now, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to grab a folder. Folder in this context would be all the information here. So for us, we can just put inbox. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I put this as unread because it wouldn't show up as a data point if I click that. So I'm going to go do that. And then I'm going to hit OK. And we're going to do all emails. Or actually, let's go ahead and just select it. But in theory, you'd want to do from now on, and then when you turn it on, and then keep proceeding, right? So then here is the email we're going to deal with. This is going to be the data point we're dealing with here. So perfect. We got our email. Okay, and then let's go ahead and set up our first situation here. So let's learn how to do a filter, and we're going to learn a bunch of stuff when it comes to ChatGPT. So we're going to go ahead and do OpenAI here. We're going to go ahead and choose create completion, and we're going to go ahead and do a here we go, create prompt completion. Let's go ahead and move this over here. It's not get too crazy here. And then the model, you have the choice to choose here. Now what's great is for this kind of context, we can use 3.5. One thing I want to point out is that I don't have access to GPT-4 yet. 4 specifically make it seems like, so keep that in mind. For us, we're going to use obviously Tech DaVinci 003, and then we're going to go ahead and do some prompt structuring here. Now, what you'll notice is we do have a little bit of information and a little bit of ability when it comes to make, but what is the one big thing we're missing here? If you're familiar with my channel, you already know what I'm going to say. It's a memory key. and that's huge. A memory key is going to what essentially allows us to ensure consistent outputs. So just off the fact that we don't have a memory key is already, you're hurting yourself a little bit. But for now, there's still stuff we can do with ChatGPT and this. We're going to go ahead and say, based on this email, do semicolon. And actually, what we're going to do is we're actually set this up as the filter or the sentiment. And then we're going to go ahead and provide the email data here. So we're going to say subject line. We're going to do semicolon parentheses. We're going to do body, semicolon parentheses. And we're going to provide the underlying data here. So this is how they format the data here. And if you're familiar with Zapier, obviously it doesn't look as nice UI wise, but let's go ahead and just get all the information we need here. So we're going to go ahead and get the subject. We're going to go ahead and get the text content. And there we go. We're going to say generate a yes. We do semicolon yes or no, semicolon no, on whether this is a potential lead interested in our services. Now, one thing we got to add here is a little bit of context. The context, we just received an email. We are an AI automation agency. I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK here. And then let's go and test this action. To test the action here, which is another thing that's kind of different from Zapier, is we're going to right click the underlying module here. We're going to say run this module only. Okay, so I was having some slight issues and then I realized I wasn't on the right method. So you got to choose the create a chat completion method. GPT models, this is their way of essentially, and as you see here, this is a better explanation of it, but this is their way of essentially grabbing either GPT 3.5 or GPT 4. As you see here, if I deselect the map here, I can choose between 3.5 and 4, and you have the choice here. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit map here. We're gonna continue using 3.5, and then essentially from there though, we would choose the role of assistant. This is essentially gonna allow us to talk to it, and it's gonna respond in a helpful manner. Then we provided the information here. So we just received an email. We are an AI automation agency. Based on this email, provide the context of the subject and the body, yes or no, on whether it's a potential lead for an interested service. Let me hit OK here, and let's go ahead and run this module. As you see here, we're going to provide specific data for the subject and text as we are using, or we are just running that specific module. So I'm going to come over here, provide the subject. I'm going to go ahead and provide the body here. And then let's go ahead and hit OK. Let it run. And as you see here, we can go ahead and click here, and this is the result. So what we can do here is you can see your original message by clicking this. And then if you come over to output, if I hit choices 1, it's going to go ahead and tell us the underlying message here, which is going to be yes. So because of the fact that that email just received was a potential lead, it has identified that that email is in fact, it is a yes for being a potential lead, if that makes sense. So from here, we're gonna go ahead and set up a filter. To do so, we're gonna go ahead and set up what they call here is a router. And essentially a router is their way of identifying two different paths in a flow here. And what we can do here essentially is we can go ahead and set up a Gmail for each one of these flows. But for now, let's go ahead and set up the if else of whether it is a yes or no. So we're gonna do setup filter. I'm gonna say if client equals yes. And then we're gonna go ahead and do condition, and then you see how it says text is equal to, so we're gonna do condition, and we're gonna go ahead and find the output here. So we're gonna go to choices, message, content, and then we're gonna say equal to yes, and then we're gonna hit OK. And then the other one is just gonna be if client equals no. We're gonna go ahead and do our condition here of the same thing. So essentially go to our choices, our message, and then in theory, if that email was not a client email, we would have got an output from ChatGPT saying no. It could no here. So essentially this sets it up where we have two different choices. In theory, if we have a client that says no, we could set up a whole different flow for what occurs after that. And then if they say yes, we can go ahead and set up that draft email. So we're going to Gmail here. We're going to create a draft. We're going to go ahead and choose all mail. We're going to add a recipient. That recipient is going to be the underlying email we received it from. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the watch emails here. We're going to do the sender one. So it's going to be webrista@webcafecommerce.com. And then from here, this is where we create the subject line and the content for the underlying email. So actually, before we even create that, we do need to create essentially a ChatGPT block that's going to create that subject line and that email. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an OpenAI block here, and we're going to do create a completion. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and make sure we do GPT models, and let's go ahead and do a GPT-4. We're going to add a message. We do the role of assistant, and then we're going to go ahead and say based on this email. And then we're going to go ahead and provide the relative context again. Do subject, do body, and then we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. So we're going to add the subject line here. Parentheses, and then we're going to do the body of the email here, and in this context we can keep it as plain text. That should be fine and sufficient for what we're trying to do here. I'm going to come over here and real quickly grab the beginning of the context here. Now, one thing I could have done in theory was clone this to make my life easier, but I just want to show you step by step what we're doing here. So we are an AI automation agency, generate a body of an email in response to this potential lead. And then essentially what we can do here is I could give a ton of data, a ton of information for this Gmail, but I just want to give you a very simple flow here. So we're just going to say respond to potential leads with a notice they will receive an onboarding PDF and a quick answer to any questions. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and add a parameter here. We're going to say parameter max of 4 sentences, output in HTML. Now, I have no clue how good this is going to look, but we're going to go ahead and just hit OK here, and let's go ahead and run this. One thing I messed up on is that two subjects here. We got to make sure we do the text content here, and then we're going to hit OK. We're going to run this module only. We're going to provide the data. I'm going to hit OK here. I'm going to let this flow proceed, and let's see what this end output will be for the underlying email. I'll be very interested. I think I need to restructure the formatting a little with the underlying body due to the fact that I didn't say no text before or after. So let's go and see what it comes up with. Honestly, perfect. As you see here, it has Dear Corbin, which was the footer of that original email here. We are excited to hear our AI automation services for customer service in the restaurant industry. You are shortly going to receive an onboarding outlining the details of our service. Rest assured that any questions you will have will quickly be addressed. Kind regards, your name. Now let me show you a little trick here. If there's any time there is data that is found within an output, but then it gives a variable point instead of like the actual real data, what you can do here is you can go ahead and add a, simply this, essentially do your name, or my name actually. My name, semicolon, parentheses, and then in this context, let's just say my name is Tim Adams. And then from here, we can go ahead and retest this. And there you go. We got the same formatted email here, but now it's taken to an account our underlying name, Tim Adams. Let's go ahead and proceed from here and build out that draft email. We're going to go ahead and do a Gmail block here. We're going to create a draft. We're going to choose a folder of all mail. We're going to make sure we choose our recipient here, which is going to be the sender's email address here. And then we're going to go ahead and choose our subject. We're going to go to do a fixed text subject. We're going to do your automation expert is here. And then for the underlying content, as you see, you can use HTML tags, and we've prompted our ChatGPT to do HTML tags. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, one thing I want to point out is that as you'll notice when you're grabbing data, it can kind of get confusing when you don't rename it. So to do that, you can go ahead and rename here. We could put body of email. So when we call upon that data, it's a lot simpler, a lot easier for us to understand. We can add attachments if we wanted to, but we don't need to. We're gonna go ahead and hit continue or OK here. And then for the purposes of this tutorial though, I'm gonna actually send it to my email here, or the course's email, rather than the main email here. And then for now, let's go ahead and see what this will look like. So we're gonna hit OK, and let's go ahead and run this module. So rather than running it from the end like that, I'm gonna go ahead and just show from the beginning. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset this up real quick. We have this as on red, as that's the only emails that are being looked for and searched for. I'm gonna come back to the beginning of this. We're gonna go ahead and say run once. Actually, this won't work. I think we're gonna have to go ahead and choose where it starts. We're gonna select our data point of our email here. Select that there. We're gonna hit OK. And then let's go ahead and hit run once. So as you see, you can see it live, how it's communicating with the underlying scenario here. And then as you saw, it essentially deemed it as yes, this is a client email. And then we should have a draft set up in our backend here. As you see, once a flow occurs, we can go ahead and check the outputs here and see what it does. So this was the inputs here. Come over here to choices and message. This is the message that was sent. And I went ahead and sent it to our Gmail as a draft. So this is a very cool little flow here showing AI automation on Make when it comes to handling sentiment analysis and setting up an HTML body email. Now, as you see here, since we've ran it a couple of times in our testing, it does count that as operations and data transfer. So we have currently 18 operations based off that expenditure and around 20 kilobytes of data transfer. Once you create a scenario like this, it's easy to clone, move to folder, and then essentially anyone within your team would be able to access that same scenario and help you work on it. As you see here, once you go to that scenario, it comes up with all this information here. We can go to history. We can see past runs, the associated operations with that run, and the associated data transfer with that run, and then if there was any incomplete executions. So that just about does it. We did a complete overview of the Make platform when it comes to OpenAI, ChatGPT, and just automation in general with this platform. Make sure to like the video if you felt like you learned something. Make sure to subscribe if you want daily artificial content. We're doing a ton of stuff here at WebCafe AI when it comes to AI automation, so make sure to stay tuned with us. If you want to learn more about AI and automation and how to leverage that for business, check out the playlist at the end of this video as we dive into further and more complex tutorials when it comes to Zapier's platform and all 5,000 apps that can be found there. But without further ado, I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for tuning in. And yes, surprise, I'm an AI avatar. Make sure to explore more here at Web Cafe, where we demystify AI for your personal and business life. Until next time.